Good morning. Eddie and I have decided to curl up in the study. It's raining again. My hair's a mess. I'm looking forward to going back to school, and we thought that we'd do a little reciprocal read video for you before we go for our WALK this morning. So, what I thought this morning is I'd do something slightly different. I like to read around when I am reading books, sort of find out a bit about the author. So I always tell you to go and sort of research the background, find out a little bit about them. And I found a really interesting article in the Times. I don't often read the paper from cover to cover, but I found a really interesting article in the Times which was actually written by the author himself. So this one is by Peter James, and he writes kind of murder mysteries. I suppose your granny probably likes to watch I'm trying to think of some some things like Broadchurch, I guess, Miss Marple, or those kind of murder mysteries, and Peter James writes those kinds of things, and he's written an article for the Times which explores why or how he got his inspiration for his latest book. His latest book is called You Are Dead. I think it's really suitable for Key Stage 4 only, but I thought the process of looking at the article and sort of thinking about the language he uses, and it's just an interesting article. I'm always encouraging you to read around, have a think outside the box, don't feel like you've got to read fiction all the time. Reading newspapers is just as useful. Articles, magazine articles, just things that you're interested in. So this is what I'm interested in, and I'm going to share a little bit with this. So when you see a newspaper article, what you have is obviously the headline, and then halfway down you have kind of a strapline or a sort of a teaser for what is going on. So what drew me into this, and I didn't really know anything about Peter James before, was that the headline is "I'm unleashing a serial killer born in Broadmoor." So that verb unleashing made it sound very exciting. Serial killers, well, we know there's been quite a few famous ones over the years, and actually Peter James mentions people like Fred West and the Yorkshire Ripper in this. My first thought is, oh, where is Broadmoor? What is Broadmoor? So I looked that up before I started. And Broadmoor is a psychiatric hospital where, very poorly people go when they need to be kept safe from society. So it's is it in Berkshire? I think it's in Berkshire. I wrote it down. So yeah, it's a very famous institution, and I think the scene of a few kind of crime thrillers. But Peter James visited Broadmoor. So as I'm reading through this, I'm just thinking about the vocabulary, what I know, so my prior knowledge, and those kinds of things. Several years after waiting more than 2 years for my request to be processed, I was granted permission to visit Broadmoor, Britain's most secure psychiatric hospital and home to some of our most notorious murders, including the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, and the London nail bomber, David Copeland. Sorry, I'll move so you can see me and not Eddie a bit more. Now, I haven't heard of the London nail bomber, but I have heard of the Yorkshire Ripper and Peter Sutcliffe. So again, in my reciprocal reading, what I might do is go back and ask that question, who is that? For the past 30 years, I've spent a day a week on patrol with Brighton Police, researching my Roy Grace detective novels, which have sold 16 million copies. He's a writer. The purpose of this article is obviously to interest us in his book, so he's telling us a little bit about them. I've witnessed numerous gruesome events, but no experience has chilled me like this. Now, you can tell he's a writer because he's using emotive language. So the word gruesome, if you don't know what that means, I would, ask someone or look it up, but gruesome means awful, terrible, sort of makes you feel unwell. It's not nice to look at. So gruesome events. And actually, he's used emotive language as well. No experience has chilled me like this. So we're on the second paragraph, and already I'm thinking, ooh, what has he experienced that has made him feel so awful? Broadmoor sits on the top of a Berkshire hill. There we go, there's our answer. A classic Victorian red brick institution topped by watchtowers and an enormous perimeter wall more than a quarter of a mile long. So we get an idea of what it looks like. We get an idea of the size of it. I love Victorian architecture. I think it looks really gothic. St Pancras Station, one of my favourites. So in my mind, I'm picturing something that's imposing and dark. Perfect scene for a prison, really. My host was the charming chaplain. Nice bit of language used there. I remarked that I was surprised his many keys needed for the institution doors were attached to a leather thong rather than a chain. He said chains had been banned after an inmate seized one and almost tore an officer in half with it. That set the tone for the visit. So we've got a bit of drama, a bit of background about how serious the situation is. So that, again, when we talk about engaging the reader, making us feel like we are intrigued by what's going on, then these are really useful techniques, not tasks. We visited an assessment room where inmates were monitored for sociability. About 35 people were reading or doing arts and crafts. As we entered, accompanied by 2 officers, everyone fell silent and stared at me. I've never felt so scared, horribly aware that if anything kicked off, we were hugely outnumbered. A man with a ponytail, straight out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, approached and asked, "Have you come to flush out the bog?" So I like his colloquialisms there. He continued, "It's nice in here. We enjoy it." I stammered, "Thank you." So amongst all the seriousness, there's a little bit of humour, isn't there? It's quite nice. And I like his use of the word stammered. Another man in a suit was painting an angel on a Christmas card. He told the chaplain, "I've lost my state of grace." Assured it returned, he fretted, "Do you really think so?" Later, I remarked, he seemed a gentle soul. He's here because he woke up one day and decided he'd like to be a woman. So he murdered his girlfriend, cut off her breasts and sewed them to his chest, the chaplain explained. And that stops you in your tracks. For me, we've got this normality combined with the things that Peter James is researching, sort of what makes somebody want to hurt somebody else in such a way. I asked if he believed some people were born evil, or did something happen to turn them evil? He explained that around 50% of Broadmoor's population are schizophrenics who claim they hear voices. They have a chemical imbalance in their brain. Provided they took their medication, they could return to society. And actually, I really like these little bits of science understand. It helps us understand what's going on. The other half are psychopaths. People born without normal empathy who don't change. Psychopaths don't become criminals necessarily, but they're cunning and ruthless, so they can play the game, and sometimes they are massively successful. A child who's born psychopathic is generally into a home with no love and is abused, and they experience death and desertion at early age, potentially make them serial killers. And here was the genesis of my 11th Roy Grace novel, a novel called You Are Dead, about a serial killer warped by bullying at his public school. It was based on my own experiences at Charterhouse in the 1960s. Experiences like this can spur you to seek terrible revenge, and once you've achieved that and find you can live with the guilt, what's to stop you doing it again? So that's his inspiration for the book. Now, his book focuses on finding out who has been carrying out the crimes. So he's just researching the motivation for those to sort of give him a realistic insight into his characters. And I found that fascinating. Now, the rest of this is really interesting. It's sort of, he goes on to talk about the writing process and how revisiting the prisoner sort of gave him more ideas and more understanding, really, of his characters. But I like the way he writes his article, and I think for a fiction writer, it's nice to read things that are personal, but also things that are non-fiction as well.